Record. All right, we are recording now, and now we're recording live. Your man Hilton George from BlerDCon, and on the other screen is my homegirl Xero Gravity. She's doing her thing. Horror extraordinaire fan, just super, just buried in all the ghoulish, scary stuff you can imagine. But she doesn't make it scary. She makes it totally adorable. So it's not, you don't have to worry about the kids in the room.
Oh, thanks.
I wanted to catch this moment raw because, we're like 12 hours away, past the screening of the first episode of Lovecraft Country. This is a show, a series, an anthology that is adapted from a book that is adapted from material from H.P. Lovecraft, story that is set in the civil rights era, Jim Crow era, 1950s America, Chicago, and all that sort of stuff. And there's monsters, and there's ghosts, and there's horror, and there's cops, and there's racists, and there's separated lunch counters, the horror, overload, and we had a big viewing premiere last night, and tons of people got a chance to see it. And, I was always most curious about how my horror fanatics would look at this show. This first episode, it's not like a movie where you get everything. It's kind of like just an opener, and, the effect of someone who understands, Stephen King, understands John Carpenter, understands the horror genre. You probably have an eye that myself or other people might not have. So this is going to be a really interesting discussion. So I want to give a big shout out to HBO for reaching out to BlerDCon in order to reach the Black nerd community, which they did in spades, in gangbusters. It was amazing. There were just people all over the internet that are using the hashtag Blerds in Lovecraft Country, which is LCC. Blerds in LCC is the hashtag. You search that, you'll see some of your favorite cosplayers, your favorite creators, artists, writers, people who are in the Blerd community who have seen it and expressing their own views. But this is ours, okay? So I'm going to just go ahead and fire this over to you. Tell me, Zoe, what did you think? What did you think? You had 45 minutes of just you and this show. What did you think?
Well, okay, where are we landing on spoilers right now? Am I still being quiet?
Yes, no spoilers, because remember, we saw this with only a couple of hundred other people, so we gotta be spoiler free. But I don't know that we have a ton of spoilers with this first episode. It seemed like this episode kind of cracked open a bunch of doors and kind of let us know where we were and who the characters were. So I don't know how hard you're gonna have to bite your tongue for the next 30 days.
Not too hard, but I do know that a lot of people like to go into shows like this completely blind. So I'll do my best to circumlocute, but holy hell, man. That even the first episode was a ride. Gosh, was it a ride. I was alone in my bed last night sweating.
Oh, no, not alone.
Alone. Well, that's the best time to watch horror.
Oh, I forget your horror expertise. I defer. Go on.
The goal is to be scared. The goal is to be creeped out, uncomfortable. And I don't think I was exactly there yet from the Lovecraftian standpoint, but just being Black in America, the 1950s horror of living in a Jim Crow era. So now there's two let's say antagonists here. You have whatever the hell is coming out of these Lovecraft books, and just racist America, which is something I like to call real life scary. This is like my recurring term. I was just here with The Invisible Man, abusive relationships. That's not just hard, that's real life scary.
Right.
And it's very rare that you get to see, it's just coming to be a theme now, but it's really rare that you get to mesh two of those together. Real life scary and, fantasy scary, because horror is fantasy. It's, we use it as an escape to, escape our own lives. And, if, people are getting killed by monsters right and left, then, living in the United States really isn't that bad.
Yeah,
But when you
the
mix it
monsters do bring in a
together,
little bit of equalizing effect. They
yeah.
kind of equal opportunity murderers and
Oh
killers
yeah.
and devourers, which is kind of to their credit in a way, and it's kind of like not as scared of that as the cop with a gun, but
At least, the Lovecraft monsters are intersectional enough to not give a crap about who you're murdering. But it was excellent. And especially just for, the first episode, we didn't get too much into the plot. We got just a little taste. You get enough of a backstory from your characters. I'm sure, we'll go deeper into that later as the show actually starts to air, but it's just enough to set the scene, just enough to make you nervous.
Mhm.
There is nobody on this earth that's going to watch the first episode and say, nah, I'm good. There's no way. There is
Yes, yes.
absolutely no way.
Well, you cannot discount the fact that Misha was the one who kind of adapted this screenplay and kind of made the book go to the screen. And her last credit was Underground, which the entire series was about escaping slaves. And so creating that constant sense of tension without the Jaws shark music or the drum beat of something coming off screen to come snatch you up, just that sense of impending danger that just is in the faces of everybody on screen and in the voices of everybody's dialogue. She's got this amazing talent for that. And I think that she found a way to make scenes like when the cop is following, our heroes, down the road, as horrifying as any monster scene that I would imagine could happen on a small screen. So I think that tension that you're speaking of, that fear that you're thinking of, and that you felt, I think we have a horror specialist, somebody who is probably going to emerge and maybe not just make this her first venture into horror over the arc of her career, because she's done so well with this. And just the
Mhm.
idea that the reality is, just like you were saying, the reality of Jim Crow America is part of a Black person's historical DNA. It hits home in a way that is just as scary as a thousand-eyed monster chasing you through the woods, right?
Totally.
So let
Totally.
me ask you a question about strong female lead characters. Okay, so I got the sense just from this first episode that we're going to see a lot of strong women characters in this anthology, in this series. Not scene skippers, not somebody kind of like, okay, it's her vignette, I'm going to go get something to drink and come back type characters, but characters
Mhm.
that command you on the screen and make you watch them, can't pull your eyes away. Tell me what your impressions were as they kind of showed up on the screen, and what you think they might foretell.
Letitia fucking Lewis.
Yeah.
It's gonna be good. You can. I mean, how long was this first episode? Maybe a couple minutes shy of an hour,
Hmm.
and the tone is set. You know exactly. Oh, I mean, not exactly, but you have a really strong feeling of what we're going to be getting into. And even though it was just the first episode, you get enough. Like I said before, you get enough backstory from each of the characters to understand what type of role that they play. The three of them together are three heroes, if you will. Um, and you sense it from the beginning. Or one of the female protagonists in this first episode, I'm hoping that she'll stick around. I can't see her, dropping out anytime soon. It seems like she plays, to me, it seems like she plays a vital role in keeping the group together. Of accepting responsibility, even in the face of police, in the face of monsters. Even in this first episode, there were instances that you don't think the average person would give up to, the role of the woman, but it's two times she saved the day. Two times she saved the day.
In
And
one
if
episode.
that's
In
in one
episode
episode,
one.
she saved the day two times in one day.
The
You don't
same
get
day.
that very often. Maybe you get one episode where the woman ends up being on top, but it seems like she's really the glue. And I can't wait for more characters to eventually be introduced, to just get more of this. I want to see her save the day like every episode. I mean, I don't know what's coming next, but it's going to be good, and I have no criticisms for what I've seen so far.
Which is amazing because I think, and this isn't a critique of HBO specifically, but the HBO series thumbprint, if you will, like I know if I'm going to watch a new show on HBO, I'm going to give it that first 3 episodes to not bore me or anything like that. But I know that the first 2 or 3 episodes of most of the shows are going to be expository. Like I'm just going to learn where we are, who people are, how they relate to each other, and then slowly the momentum of the mission and the plot will start to, to gin. You saw this with Game of Thrones. You saw this with probably the first 4 episodes, if you weren't a comic book fan of Watchmen. So that slow burn is kind of a signature of the HBO series, which I kind of like. I like that about the shows because I know it's going to pay off if I just pay attention to all that I'm being given. But for them to come in, do that, tell everyone where you are, when you are, introduce, my God, there might have been 10, 12 different characters. And we can't really tell at this point who's going to be a major character going forward, because he meets a lot of people and there's people passing by. Hey, Tig, hey, Atticus, hey, Letty, yada, yada, yada. But I mean, I feel like we met like 11 or 12 like key people in this first episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be very interested to see, one, are there more characters that are going to get introduced that we haven't met yet, right? Two, how the characters are going to interact. It seems like everyone just kind of got a little snapshot of their history and their relationship to one another. Letty pulls up, and I 100% agree with you. She is my favorite character, even above Atticus at this moment, and here's why.
Yep.
He is just breaking all the rules from day one. I'm just going to make a couple notes and you'll probably see this. One, as soon as she pulls up on scene, she's already pulling up in a car that's pulling the wrong way on the road. I don't know if you saw, the cop was like, you can't, this is not where you're supposed to be. And this is, Letty's like, boom, hey, here I am, whatever. So automatic, she comes in wrong, which is like, just makes her stand out. Her sister is mid-concert, does not know that she's coming, and she manages to make her way on stage,
Mm-hmm.
this song begrudgingly with us. You can tell who's kind of like, oh, okay, you just showing up, fine, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And she's even fighting, some of the patriarchal, impulses of the men she's in the car with,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't necessarily want her to drive, and they don't necessarily feel like she can handle, being, leading and contradicting them and stuff in a loving way. But,
Mm-hmm.
she, in the end, she's the one that comes around and goes, okay, the fire is lit. You got to trust me to handle this. And if that means I got to run faster than you, or drive faster than you, or get you the hell up out of your seat, and don't ask no questions. The black trope, if I'm running, we all running type of
Yep.
thing. She's doing the running, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of has that energy to just kind of like meets the demand. It meets the challenge 100%,
Mm-hmm.
everywhere on the plot where it's needed. And I'm just like, this is what we get from her in episode 1. Just what are we going to do when we get some real character development and scene development, plot development, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you, because you have, and if people don't know you, when I say a horror fan, I don't mean someone who just, enjoys horror. Like, you consume horror. You have seen and can dissect horror genre films and series, B films and A films and movies that only aired in drive-ins back in the 30s and stuff. You're into that, right? So
Yes,
from
yes.
your, with your perspective on this, and your knowledge of how, even the best horror movies and even books play out, where do you think the fear is going to come from? Is this going to be something that's character driven, or are we going to see something come bubbling up out the ground that's going to just be so horrific that, the wide screen can't take it? What do you think is going to be? And we might get both, but I mean, where do you think the real pulse is going to be for the
Okay, I have a couple things for my answer. So throughout the history of horror, whatever is the antagonist, whatever it is that's out to get you, always reflects a common theme, something that in the time that this film was made, something that people in general are afraid of. So that's why zombies have existed for so long in horror media, because really our greatest fear is ourselves. And if it's not exactly what's being portrayed as, what's out to get you, it's metaphorical. And so it's always a code for something, which is why this is so different, because it's not a metaphor. It's just right out in front of you. Police brutality, racism. It's just, it is what it is. But now you have the secondary, the secondary threat, which are monsters, which I can't really be sure if that's a code for anything, because, the obvious code here is Jim Crow America. So it's kind of difficult to tell where this is going to go. I think it would be cool, and it would just add a ridiculous amount of layer and depth if, whatever monsters we end up seeing in this film could translate into, a fear of something else. And then the other answer that I have has to do with jump scares. So jump scares didn't really come along in horror until later on. And I find that as a horror fan, a lot of times jump scares can be not very tasteful if the world building isn't there, if the atmosphere, sound design isn't there. Jump scares are easy to lean on for a quick reaction from the fans. And everyone has a basic reaction of the jump. And, even if something doesn't outright scare you, the idea of something doesn't outright scare you, a jump scare is going to get you regardless. It's, it's within our natural reaction. But being scared of a concept, being scared of something that doesn't, jump out to you immediately, that's when you know that something is really scary. That's when you know it's scary. If you don't need that jump scare, as a horror director, producer, whatever, writer, you've absolutely done your job. And that's how I felt watching the first episode last night. Was, as I was saying, I was alone in my room sweating, and I don't think we got any jump scares, but I was nervous for the characters. It made me uncomfortable. There was times I was clenching my teeth because you don't know what the hell is coming. And that I think, I know it makes this an automatic success in my eyes, and I just want to see more of it. But now that the scare factor is already there, it's built so well with the atmosphere. And even I could go as far, the sound design in this episode is awesome already. It's scary. It's just flat out scary. But back to the monsters, I think the monsters in this series can only add layers, because we have the overarching fear, terror of this atmosphere, of this realm, this world that is built. We have the antagonist, which is quite obviously police brutality, Jim Crow America, yada yada yada. And so what kind of role are these monsters going to have in terms of, what does it say about what we're scared of right now? Because you don't see this very often, and I can't answer any more of it until I see more.
I know. This
driving me nuts.
If we get the opportunity to have conversations like this, in between each episode, I think that each episode is going to have its own framework of gets and its own sort of standalone personality. As an anthology, well, first, the writer of the book didn't originally write the book as a book. He wrote it as a pitch for a show. So the material is ripe for kind of like a Scooby-Doo Mysteries, or an X-Files, or a supernatural type of show, where each episode kind of has its own little micro story and plot, but there's a larger arc from start to finish that the characters are kind of going through. And so I think each episode is going to kind of give you a little bit more of the characters and a little more of demonstration of what the directors and the writers and everyone is going to do to kind of build and hopefully maintain that fear. For me, in a horror TV show, the more I know and the more familiar I am with whatever singular villain or monster or whatever there is out there, the less I'm scared of it, right? So it's kind of like, I want to know about the creature from the Black Lagoon or Frankenstein, or we, you know, we have these romantic visions of certain monsters in our head, and we attach ourselves to that. But if we know them too well, we might not be as scared of them. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing to see. Like, how much exposition are they going to allow us to have while maintaining enough mystery both to drive the story forward, like, oh, I got to see what happens next episode, while at the same time maintaining that fear and maintaining that sense of impending threat over 10 episodes, you know, in 10 weeks. But I mean, if there's ever a team that can do it, this is it. You know, Misha Green, you know, J.J. Abrams, Monkey Paw Productions, Jordan Peele. These guys are, you know, excellent at this. And if they're all having any part in, you know, kind of maintaining that, I'm certain that that's going to not be a problem going forward. And as far as jump scares, you and I have had this conversation before. You know, I love pure horror in that I'm afraid for everyone on the screen. Like, it's the classic storytelling is about people. And the more you get to know and love and care about the characters, the less you want to see them dismembered. It's just that simple, right? so you're kind of like, no, not him, or no, you got to run. You know, you're with them. Like, come on, we got to get you out of here. You know, and if there is this sense of doom and there is this sense of ongoing threat, whether it's jumping out of the side of the screen and going boo, or just hovering over every scene as, you know, like this thundercloud, as some of the best movies do, I think that they have successfully created a set of characters that we can attach ourselves to. I want to talk about the moment, right? We are in a moment in time that didn't necessarily exist in this way when this show was being shot and, you know, written for the screen and, you know, being produced. You know, luckily, you know, you and I know people who are associated with the production, and we were aware that it was coming in some form before it came about. So it didn't just pop up. We had some concept of what was going to happen, had a little bit of a chance to do our own research and that kind of stuff. But what I'm thinking is that, you know, with what's happening with the Black Lives Matter protests and this country's eye on the Black community and on human rights in America and all of these very, very sensitive subjects, you know, this show is probably going to strike more of a nerve and more of a right, you know, zeitgeist moment, you know, for this country than it probably intended. I'll give you an example of something small that when it was shot, probably they didn't think too much of it. But when well, I'm not going to give too much away, but there's a scene where they are driving away in the midst of, you know, someone chasing them with guns, mainly because they're Black. And what do you see on the billboard just as they speed by, but an ad for Aunt Jemima pancakes, right?
I didn't notice that.
I saw that and I was like, oh my God, like,
Wow.
who could have thought to put that there? You know, they're taking Aunt Jemima off of the pancake box because of the offensive nature of the period and time she represents and all this stuff. And Black people are like, well, that's nice, but we didn't really ask for that. You know, we're trying not to get shot, you know, by law enforcement. Thank you. But, you know, blah, 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 blah. But the idea that moment represented in the context of, here is this Black woman in, you know, this slavery portrayal, you know, as she was, being the backdrop for a car of Black people being chased by the Klan, you know, trying to kill them for having the audacity to park their car in the city that's a sundown town or what have you, right? Yeah. And so the juxtaposition of that imagery is kind of like reminding you, like, well, maybe Aunt Jemima's a little bit more important in the cultural sense than maybe we were even thinking at the time. So I want to ask you, you know, for your sense now, for full disclosure, if you guys don't know, Xero's a little younger than me, you know, 2-3 years, you know, we didn't go to college together or anything, but, you know, I'm maybe a couple of years ahead of her. But even as a young person, you know, looking at what's happening in the streets, and you've actually organized some of the rallies in your area of New York, you know, around this issue. So I know it means something to you. You have a personal view on it. You know, what do you think is going to happen when this show, with this kind of a plot and backdrop, hits, you know, the living rooms of, you know, 45 million households, you know, in the middle of the Black Lives Matter era, and, you know, George Floyd, and, you know, hate crimes legislation, and the Trump presidency and election year. I mean, all of this stuff. You know, what do you think is going to be that impact for all of this?
This is going to be everything. I think we're owed this show, Black geeks in particular. You know, Black geeks have in the history of Black geeks have always had a hard time finding themselves, finding a safe space, finding people like them. It's the struggle that every Black geek goes through, and the number one way to combat that is through representation. And I will scream it and I will preach it until the day that I die, but representation is everything. Representation matters so much, not just for individual people, different types of people, but also movements like this. This is how we remember things. You know, this is Night of the Living Dead. That movie means so much to Black horror nerds that is like close to the Black nerd horror Bible as you can get. There's so much packed in to that one movie of everything that's happening during that time, that if you just watch the movie, I mean, even though it's fictional and zombies really aren't real, but it tells a whole story that I'm sure people of that time would want you to know. And it makes it more accessible and easier to understand if it's from a fantasy point of view. Not everybody really wants to, you know, not everybody's into documentaries and, you know, historical fiction. I understand that could be sometimes an eyesore. Nobody really wants to read textbooks. You know, it's just the basic stuff you have to do through school. But when moments like this are captured through media, through popular media, is when it gets through people's heads, you know, because nerds at the end of the day, they just want to talk fan theories. They want to talk about what they just watched. And if you can rope all of this stuff into it, it makes not just people, but organizations, movements become represented in a positive way, even though, you know, it's not the most positive thing that we're going through right now, but it's important. And it's so important to remember this moment and to remember all of the moments that led up to this moment, everything that's going to come after this. So people are going to be happy. People are going to be pleased with what they're seeing. They're going to say, finally, we have, you know, just a regular nerdy show. Like, we have a Stranger Things that tells us more, you know, about it's more culturally aware. It makes sense. It's not a history lesson. It's not a history lesson. You're going to enjoy every single moment of it like I did. But it also still tells an important story that needs to be told, just like Black Panther did. You know, Black Panther wasn't about how Black folks are being treated all over the world as opposed to Wakanda, but it was, you know, it stood for something much more than just, we finally got the Black Avenger that we've been asking for forever, but it tells a story within a story, and that story could be translated. You know, now young minds can understand what's going on. You know, if somebody maybe like a little kid doesn't know what the hell Jim Crow is. It's a huge part of American history, and if nobody is doing the justice to teach this little kid what happened in our country before us, you know, if it's not properly taught in the school system, they're going to get it through stuff like this. They're going to see Black Panther and say, oh, I think, oh, you know, this happened like in Black Panther. Oh, I recognize that. That was in the show that I like on HBO, Lovecraft Country. Do I think that there might be a little negative pushback? Yeah, but there always is, just because there's grumpy people on the internet. But I feel like the population that will be thankful for this will totally outweigh and just silence the hell out of everyone that has an issue. And even if you do have an issue, if, you know, you're like, why are you going to bring politics into that? Which is like a common theme right now. Why do you have to make it political? I just want to enjoy horror, sci-fi, blah, blah. You know, it's not enough to shove it down your throats, Black Lives Matter, if that's what you think you're being attacked about. But, you know, it's all about the coding. And I think horror is a great genre. horror and sci-fi, actually. And this show definitely encompasses both. But it's a great way to tell a story within a story. And the show was so freaking good already. And like, I haven't even seen the show. I've only seen the first episode, and I already know that this is going to be an icon, and it's going to go right down there with Watchmen, with Black
Oh,
Panther.
absolutely. I think this is going to be a seminal moment, and you touched on something that was very immediate and apparent about the characters that are in the show. Now, obviously, it's more blatant with others than with some, but we noticed that at least two or at least three of our main characters are blurs. So, Atticus is this character who, they describe him before he left, apparently, to go to war, as a skinny kid with Coke bottle glasses, who was a member of it was a very complicated name, the sci-fi science fiction club, in high school. And, he's a book nerd. He's reading, what's this, the Princess of Mars book, while he's on the bus, and he's dreaming in sci-fi. He's that guy, and then you have Hippolyta, his aunt, is looking through a telescope at one point, trying to see something. She's talking about having I'm going to go, I can't wait, I'm going to go up on the roof because I'm going to get a better view of some constellation or something like that. And we don't think of Black people in the 60s and the 50s as, astrologists and book nerds and science fiction readers, et cetera, and it throws all that out there in the first episode. So these are going to be intrinsic aspects of the character. We know that it's going to play some role in their interactions with the plot. And so I'm thinking that not only are we going to be looking at this burst of representation of Blacks, in the 1950s Jim Crow era, obviously a diverse group, men, women, different ages, et cetera. But I think we might get some of our first self-avowed, blurred protagonists, and not the sidekick blurs, just that, the throwaway character you see in some of these movies that, he's Black and he's good with computers and he's over here typing away. I've hacked into the mainframe, sir. Not that type of a character, but one that's going out and catching the wrist, might even be getting the girl or the guy, or, all of those sorts of things. And so I think that we're looking at maybe a double layer of representation in this. And I'm not really sure how it's going to play out, but it seems so deliberate. It seems like they made a point of throwing that out there. He could have been carrying any book. They didn't have to, in the middle of the scene in the kitchen, you've got this telescope. These are things that you have to work and write into a plot to put in. So as a blurred, talking to a blurred, what do you think we're going to see going forward in the different layers of blurriness? Like, who do you think is the next blurred that might pop up on the screen? Or how do you think that this is going to play in to, these characters, going in and saving the day for the next 10 weeks? What are you thinking?
I don't know. I mean, we have the strong female character who accepts responsibility even when she's not wanted. We have the young Black man who's too smart for his own good, who reads sci-fi. We have the older Black man who is responsible for putting the young Black man onto sci-fi, because it's not just a kid thing after all.
True.
Right?
Good catch. Yeah.
And so I'm hoping, let's see, maybe, I don't know. I mean, you could go so far. It's something with having to do with science. There was somebody, I'm not sure which character it was, but somebody made a reference to the Reanimator, I think. So that tells me zombies, maybe. So maybe something having to do with the reanimating serum and something having, it's sciencey. Come on, it's Lovecraft. There has to be some sort of biochemistry, something. Black women in science, Black men in science, Black people.
Well, I think they're going to probably end up having to solve some kind of mystery that is going to require the skills that they have built up, in their reading, And I think you're seeing some of that in the world building. So if you didn't notice this, and it's just inferred, so I don't know if anybody else saw this but me, but if you notice when they broke out the almanac, not the almanac, but the map, the atlas,
Yeah.
and they were looking at all the places that that the uncle goes to build they don't call it the Green Book, but it's called the Green Book, to show Black travelers where it's safe to go and stay and eat and all that sort of stuff. And there's literal monsters on the map, like this is a dangerous place because there's werewolves and all this sort of stuff. And when they say where he thinks his father is, because the only reason he's back is because he got a letter from his father and his father's missing, the first thing out of his mouth is that's Lovecraft Country, right? Now, remember, they talk about Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft, in two separate aspects. One, the famed sci-fi and horror writer, who did all these. They even have some of his books at one point in one of their libraries. I think it's the uncle. But at the same time, they talk about him as a self-avowed white supremacist. So are they talking about Lovecraft Country as there's a lot of white supremacists in that area and we probably don't want to go? Or there's monsters that might kill us and we don't want to go? Or both? Are we looking at a dystopian, layer of historical, storytelling where the backdrop is all factual 1950s, Jim Crow, Chicago and everywhere else in the country. But there's like a tacit admission that there is magic and monsters out there that you might have to look out for. And he's marked it on the map in these different places. And, they just haven't gotten into, that acceptance. You know what I mean?
I mean, now I'm thinking, because on the map, when they're going through the map, there are all these little hotspots with, there's a serpent on this one, and then the ultimate one that they point to, I think it was like the Grim Reaper on it. I think if I remember correctly. But now that you say that, I'm thinking, now going back to the very first question, let's see, how do I word this? If the first antagonist is Jim Crow America, or the police are crazy, racist white people in Lovecraft Country, which could really mean racist territory, white supremacy territory, or, hey, you might run into werewolves here. I'm thinking maybe it could be a code, like going back to my first answer and how monsters are the antagonist is usually a code for something. Maybe, I mean, I would hope that since it's in like an anthology form, that we're maybe, I don't know, I'm theorizing, we're going to have to deal with a different type of monster every episode. And hopefully, for decompressing purposes after the episode, hopefully each different stop on that map that you see, each different monster that, the heroes will have to face, will have to outsmart, kill, etc., are metaphors for something, is a code for something else.
Monsters as a metaphor. I see. And for nerds, if that's a household of blurs that are into horror and into sci-fi, fantasy, and that sort of stuff, maybe they are using this as a metaphor to describe dangerous places as opposed to just putting a red check mark next to something.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Or this could be a reality that's self-fulfilling. Like maybe we'll see, that they are somewhat aware. Because remember when they were stuck in and again, this isn't a spoiler, it's just when they were in the cabin, and they were running from monsters, the uncle was talking to Atticus and he quoted a verse from Count Dracula, right? And it ended up being a key to what was going to happen next. Because even asks, like, what happens when you get bit by a vampire, I think he said. And he's like, what are you talking about? And he kind of like does this thing and you see, like, okay, we have another problem. and this is like his way of saying it without alerting, the people, other people in the room, that they're on to them, that like, okay, I see that this is about to become an issue and we need to be
Mm-hmm.
ready to deal with it. So I'm going to speak in code. And they use this horror verse language to kind of, so, maybe they know more than they think they know about the world to
Mm-hmm.
come. But either way, it's just a little
See
nerd
what
theory
being a
topic.
blerd gives to you. Being a blerd it could save your life. All this information that your mom and dad tells you is meaningless, is useless.
Could be.
Just saying, it might be able to get you out of a sticky situation if for some reason you remember,
Yeah.
how the Hulk turned into the Hulk. The answer is gamma radiation.
Boom.
That can save your life.
We're crossing genres here. People are here for Lovecraft. We're talking about Marvel movies.
Well, you know
It
what
might
I'm
be
talking
totally lost. There might be total
about.
horror fans watching and be like, what are they talking about? Gamma rays. They're gamma rays? Is the Hulk in this? Like,
These tropes or these spaces that we occupy. If a nerdy Black person, and like they would describe Atticus is too smart for his own good. He reads all these books. It's kind of would maybe be a bunch of useless information, but that's wrong. And because this guy and the uncle read these books, they love sci-fi, they are able to maneuver themselves out of situations that they wouldn't have been if they didn't indulge in this crap. Not crap.
this is true. This is true. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about HBO. And if anybody who watched Watchmen, when the studio brings something like this to the front, they're fully aware of what is going to happen on the screen. This is not like in the movies or TV shows where you've got some, half aware, production team or producer or executive who's not looking at the dailies and doesn't know what's going to be happening on the screen and what's in the script. And there's some really, really powerful stuff in Watchmen that we were not necessarily ready for. And because this was tied to an existing property that had, a graphic novel from the 80s and then a movie from the 90s that, some people saw the movie, some people read the book, some people did both, but we were familiar with the general world that we were getting. And HBO took a chance and went down a road that they didn't necessarily have to in that instance. And now fast forward to Lovecraft Country, and this is just a bit of foreshadowing or what have you. Here is a show where, every part of the premise is touching on sensitive issues just because of the era that it's happening in and the characters that are cast in it and where it's happening and the nature of the stories, so we can expect, some explosive exposition and some story elements that are going to be impactful and maybe even hurtful for some of us who are like, oh my gosh, this is a little too close to home for what's happening right outside my door, et cetera, et cetera. So my point is that you're seeing studios taking chances and banking in ways that they hadn't before on the mass acceptance in genres like this, for instance, which is a great encapsulating vehicle to tell stories about civil rights and about the day and the moments and important human elements of what's happening in real life. And if we're having those types of a conscious effort from a major studio like HBO, who have deliberately brought in writers and producers and know what they're going to get from them, these are not tepid people when it comes to race, in writing and producing and things like that. What can you possibly expect? Because they want to top Watchmen, and that they want to. That was such a success for them that that they're putting all of their weight behind this thing. So, I mean, what do you think's going to happen? Strictly talking about the social, statements that we might see and the metaphors that we might see. What do you think we might see happening on the screen for 10 episodes or at some point in those 10 episodes for Lovecraft Country?
Well, season 2. Well, yeah. I can't think of anything negative. I can't. But Watchmen was some heavy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that anyone was prepared for that. It's it's the same story. I mean, the movie is something else, but as far as the graphic novel go, it's the same story, but you know, you switch the time period, and if you switch the time period, which is, I really appreciate that HBO allows this, but an accurate representation of that time period. And if it's an active representation of that time period, you're going to have to deal with some heavy stuff. So now we have this new HBO show that takes place in 1950s America, which is, I mean, what scarier time period is there than that? I mean, maybe like slavery, but you know, I mean, but
Well, this
whatever.
is 1950s. This is before, you know, the real onset of the civil rights era as we know it historically.
Yeah.
You know, Martin Luther King's not on the scene. NAACP is not really on the scene. You know, we're just past Reconstruction. We're just coming out of World War II. You know, this is raw. You know, this is like, this is the era where all the really, really, really horrible stuff happened that sparked the revolution, which was the civil rights era. So if it's going to come in through that lens, man, I don't know if we're going to be able to wear socks with this one, because
No,
it's going to really, really knock us for a loop.
absolutely. And you already get so much of it. I mean, like I said before, the world building in just the first episode is amazing. And, you know, you get you know, you see the sign, this is the colored people section. And then you see it again, and the menacing looks that our characters are receiving when they drive through these towns just for existing. And you know, that is enough to let you know what the hell is going on. And this is only the first episode, so the show can't keep going without additionally addressing, you know, what was going on during that time period, because if they don't, it's just not active representation. And we already saw this in Watchmen. They're gonna do it. It's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen. Just
It's gonna happen.
sit down and
So,
get your blanket. And if everybody can't be as brave as Zoe and be in the room by themselves in the dark, you know, you might need to bring your cat or your dog or your significant other in and you know, do this with it. But yeah, you're right. It's coming some kind of way, man. You just gotta.
it will happen. And for the amount of it that we were just thrown into in the first episode, I can't even imagine what, you know, what else. I mean, I can, but I would like to say that I can't, because I'm excited to be excited.
Right. That's the only thing that I think anyone is disappointed of, is that this episode left you on just wanting more. You know, we're ready, like we're ready for next week, if you will, like, you know, as the series has started and hasn't. So any of you who think that it's just blind luck and we're like the blessed few who got to see it, you're right, we are, and we're happy for it. I said, but we do have the burden of waiting 4 weeks. We have to wait 4 weeks before, you know, the airing of episode 1, and then to go in and see episode 2. You know, so you know, we got we got the sample plate. It's like going to Outback and you just get the sample plate, and then you got to go. You know, we didn't get steak, onion, we didn't get any of that stuff. So I understand what it is, but it is a burden, and we took it on willingly. So thank you, HBO. We're so happy that you blessed us for that. I want to talk about reactions, because I spent the morning looking at my phone and just the notices because of the hashtags. You know, the designated hashtag is Blurs in Lovecraft Country, which is Blurs in LCC. And so every review and every mention and every repost has got that on it. So I'm seeing all of these coming out. And again, it's like 8 in the morning on a Saturday, and people have got their reviews up, and there's videos, and people have already lit up TikTok and stuff like that. And I haven't seen that for anything. I haven't seen that for the actual movie premieres of some of our favorite movies. You know, the Black nerd community has been specifically targeted as the audience to preview this show, and the reactions that I'm seeing is total buy-in. And you know, I did have a part in ushering a lot of people to this opportunity, not really sure who these influencers may be and how they may react. You know, a lot of these are not professional people. They're just like you and me. We like stuff, we watch stuff, and we talk about stuff, right? And I think for studios that's great on paper, but do we wait a week? Do we do a big production that's going to take 3 days, or do we, as soon as we're conscious, we start thumb tapping? It's just been all love, a lot of reflecting what you have said here in this conversation. What I think is going to happen once this hits the wider world, because remember, there's like 200, 300 people that actually saw this, just this past evening. When a couple 100,000 people are watching it on its per night, millions of households seeing it, I think this is going to end up being a cultural phenomenon. Because what you said is true. I think that because of the representation alone, and because Watchmen, I think, had a packed in inclusionary audience and a packed in exclusionary audience. I think there are people, especially people of color, who might have written themselves out of the audience list for that because I didn't see the movie, I didn't read the graphic novel, I'm not into comics. I know some blurs that are really excited, but even them talking about it, I don't understand. This is a story that starts at ground zero. It's being told in a world that all people of color can relate to in one way or another. It's an A-list acting troupe, so there's not like a whole bunch of unknown people. There are unknown people, but they're doing amazing work in here, even if you don't necessarily recognize their face. But there's some real veterans in this, and some real veterans behind the scenes. So in your estimation and your familiarization with the Black community and the Black nerd community, how do you think that's going to manifest? I mean, are we, I don't know if I've seen any opportunities for immediate cosplays just yet, or people doing fan fiction or anything like that, but how is that going to look in 5 weeks and 6 weeks down the road, when all of America, including Black America, including Black nerd America, are all watching this at once, and then they go on their devices and share how they feel and what it means to them? What do you think is going to end up on these screens, the stuff we're typing and the stuff we're reading, once that happens?
I think we're going to have the Stranger Things effect. It's tapping.
Describe that, unpack that. What is the Stranger Things effect? I've heard this before.
The Stranger Things effect is, I don't even remember what year the first season came out. It was a minute ago at this point, but when Stranger Things first dropped, it immediately took off. As soon as it hit Netflix running.
Yeah.
And you can't, just like Stranger Things, you couldn't watch the first episode, not watch the second episode. I'm not sure how they're going to roll the episodes out, if it's going to be weekly or
it's HBO. It's weekly. We got to wait 7 days between them.
What is this, 2002? But well, actually, I think that's a smarter decision, because people are going to be gripping their seats with this. But just like Stranger Things, it's going to leave no time for negative opinions. It's not going to leave any time for criticism. The number one thing that's going to be on everyone's mind is what's going to happen next. And, everyone is going to be thankful for the representation that we're getting. Everyone's going to be thankful that we have Black protagonists. Most people, a certain group, blurs especially, or just Black people in general, will be happy with the representation of this era that we're getting in a very accurate light. But besides all of that, it's gripping in this show. You want to watch it, just like Stranger Things. I mean, the acting is great. Same thing. It's a totally different world, which, people just eat that shit up. People eat it up. As soon as you're immersed in something, you become attached to the characters, you become attached to the world. You absolutely have to know what's happening next. And just like Stranger Things, I am positive that the nerd community will not let this go. They will not let this go. For all 10 episodes, I'm positive Lovecraft Country is going to be trending. It's going to stay trending, especially because it's going to be a weekly thing. But I don't see people letting go of this for a very long time. And that's great because, you know, look what happened with Stranger Things. We're going on Stranger Things 4 soon, and people are still gripped on it. And, you know, as soon as we get another teaser trailer for Stranger Things 4,
And
it's
they're
going
not
to
even kids yet. They're not even kids anymore. They're like 30.
know. They're
I mean,
like freaking teenagers. Nobody wants to watch teenagers on the screen. But it doesn't matter because you have to know. You have to know what happens after this. You know, it's impossible just to, you know, throw it over the shoulder. It's gripping like that, and people want to know. People want to know, especially when you're immersed in this entire world like this. If this were, you know, just your average sitcom, you can imagine, what's the family gonna do next? Oh, well, little Jimmy's got a new girlfriend. What are the parents gonna think? You can infer all of that, but for something like this that is so, you know, it's so deep in the sci-fi realm, it's so deep in the horror realm, you know, like Stranger Things, it's like you're not going to see anything else like this on TV right now. So you have to know. There's no way nerds are going to let this go. It's going to stay. They're going to hold it like this until the series is over, and then even after the series is over, I'll give it about 3 weeks. 3 weeks after that for people to eventually die down.
Well, I tell you, it sounds to me, and I'm talking to you, HBO, that you might have bitten off a little bit more than you thought you needed to chew. Not more than you can chew because you're HBO. But, you know, if you thought that you were going to do a one-off, and then just, that was great, and then move on to, you know, the next, you know, what's that show, you know, Take It Easy or whatever the shows are, this any of those sitcoms and stuff, I think you're going to be looking down the barrel of having to make, you know, a season 2 and maybe a season 3. And I'm telling you, I have anticipated this from the projected success of this because the anthology is laid bare that way. It's not a finite, even in the book, it's not a finite world. You know, there's stories to be told before these characters show up on the screen. There's a story to be told in between their stories while they're in the series. There's stories to be told that it's infinite possibilities. So I think that if there is a success as we are, you know, projecting here, then we will be talking about a season 2, maybe a season 3, because I think shows that are this rich, you know, cultural phenomenons are built on that. And when something is a cultural phenomenon, it's different than just a show. You know, it's not like that's just my favorite show. It's like that's my escape. That's my world. That's my second life. You know, to quote The Sims, you know, this is where I separate from my world and I go into this adventure for an hour once a week. And anywhere that I can engage with this, I'm going to continue to do it. I can see people purchasing the score of this, downloading the score.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The score is amazing. I think that you're going to see a lot of art on shirts and quotes, you know, and that sort of stuff, you know, just on shirts as the show goes forward. And I'm just hoping that HBO is on the footing to meet that demand and come at it with confidence, because everything that I'm seeing and everything that you're saying and that you're seeing points to the idea that this is going to be a movement, because there's going to be a timing for this that is unprecedented. You know, we're still going to be, you know, kind of semi-locked down.
Yeah.
You know, we're not competing with bars and clubs and bar mitzvahs and Saturday vacations coming into this fall. We're all still kind of locked down because of COVID. You know, it's horrible, but we're looking for that escape because a lot of us are home.
Yeah.
You're home, I'm
Stranger
home.
Things
You know,
did it without a pandemic.
you give me
Imagine
something
what
dope
this
to
is
watch,
with the pandemic.
even without the pandemic. So on top of that, you know, we've been given no choice. We're going to watch this screen. You're going to have a lot of first-time people that you're going to be able to catch that are going to be hooked and they're going to stay with the show. And I'm hoping that we're able to continue to have conversations like this. I feel really lucky to know somebody like you who is a super, super horror fan that can even walk somebody like me through this, even as a Black nerd, to kind of like guide, you know, this world. And I think the more we know, the more we're going to have to talk about. And I'm looking
hope so.
to it. I really am. So guys, listen, this is going to be on the BlerDCon social media. Feel free to share it. Feel free to hashtag it. Feel free to comment. If you have some alternate theories, if you were watching the show and you know a spoiler, no spoilers. If you read the book and you have some spoilers, no spoilers. But just, you know, please feel free to engage the conversation. There's a lot of you really special people in the Blerd community that had a chance to watch this. Continue talking about it. You know, I think that HBO was really looking to us to shape the direction of where this show goes. It's a unique opportunity for us. And I think the show might be a unique opportunity for a lot of new types of storytelling that's going to be a whole new genre. And it's going to just take us all into our gray hair or our green hair, whichever. It's all going to come. So thank you guys. Thank you. This is Xero Gravity. Give me your social media stuff. Just tell everyone where to get you.
You can find me on everything at IDK Gravity, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Letterboxd, if you're a movie guy, gal, non-bino. Yeah, IDK Gravity, everything. I make horror content, and I'm definitely going to be covering this. I really hope these next 4 weeks fly by, because I need it. I'm gripping it. It's already gripped. It's in my brain. I wish I want to watch it like 6 more times, but oh yeah, we in this.
We're in there. Guys, have a good weekend. We will talk to you soon.